I've been sitting on this story for a long time. It happened back when I was in high school, over 15 years ago now. I'm not using real names here, mine or anyone else's, because even though the place is gone now, I'm still not sure we won't get in trouble if the wrong person reads this. In my hometown, there used to be an abandoned military base about 20 minutes outside the city limit. It wasn't just a base, though. It was an entire village. A self-contained neighborhood built during World War II and used heavily through the Cold War. At its peak, over 200 military families lived there. Full houses, a church, a school, streetlights, the whole thing. It was abandoned in 1984, and it just sat there, empty, untouched, decaying slowly for 30 years until it was finally demolished in 2014. Growing up, everyone in the area knew about it. We called it the Abandoned Village, and it had this almost mythical status among kids my age. I heard every kind of story you can imagine. Satanic cults held rituals in the church basement. Secret military experiments were still being conducted in underground bunkers. People who went there at night never came back. Typical ghost story stuff. But it felt real enough that nobody I knew actually went. When I was in middle school, my older brother came into my room one night while I had a few friends sleeping over. He sat on the edge of my bed and told us he'd been to the village. We didn't believe him at first, but he went into detail. He described the layout of the church, the rows of empty houses, the furniture left behind in some of the rooms. Then he told us about a trapdoor in the church next to the altar. He said when he stood near it, he could hear sounds coming from below. Moans, scratching, low voices that didn't sound human. We didn't sleep that night. Looking back, I'm sure he was messing with us. But at the time, it just added another layer to the mystery of that place. All through high school, my friends and I talked about going. We swore that once we got our licenses and had access to a car, we'd finally do it. But we never followed through. Partly because we didn't know exactly where the entrance was, just that it was somewhere near the old regional airport. And partly because, even though it was abandoned, it was still technically military property. We had no idea what kind of consequences we'd face if we got caught. Then one night in our senior year, my friend Ethan came to us and said he knew where the entrance was. Someone he knew had been there recently and gave him directions. I didn't believe him. I was so sure he was bluffing that I said we should go right then and prove it. I figured we'd drive around for 20 minutes, not find anything, and go home. That's not what happened. Around 11 p.m., the four of us, me, Ethan, my friend Kyle, and our other friend Ben, piled into my car and drove out toward the airport. Ethan kept telling me to slow down and pull over every few hundred feet, convinced we'd passed the entrance. Finally, we found it. A narrow dirt road disappearing into the trees, barely visible from the main road. There was a faded no trespassing sign nailed to a post, half hidden by overgrown branches. Ethan said this was it. Kyle and Ben were already hyped. I was nervous. I didn't want my car getting damaged or worse, impounded. But they kept pushing. We've talked about this our whole lives. Let's just do it. I gave in. I turned off my headlights and let the car roll slowly down the dirt path. The trees closed in tight on both sides. After a minute or so, we came to a rusty gate stretched across the road. I got out, lifted it manually, and drove through. That's when things started feeling off. The sides of the road were littered with furniture. Beds, dressers, couches, lamps, all of it just dumped in piles among the trees like someone had been trying to clear out the houses and gave up halfway. We hit a second gate about 100 feet later. This time I made Ethan get out and lift it, and then we were inside. The village opened up in front of us like a film set. Rows of small, identical houses on both sides of a cracked, paved road. Streetlights that hadn't worked in decades. A church at the center with a tall white steeple. Everything was still there, but wrong, overgrown, sagging, covered in years of weather and rot and graffiti. I parked in front of the church and we all got out. It was dead quiet. No wind, no animals. Just the sound of our shoes on the pavement. The first thing I checked for was cameras. I didn't see any. That made me feel slightly better. We went into the church first. The doors were unlocked, or more accurately, broken. Inside, the walls were covered in spray paint. Broken pews, shattered glass. I looked for the trapdoor my brother had mentioned years earlier. Of course, there was no trapdoor. After the church, we moved to the houses. Some of them were completely wrecked, walls collapsed, roofs caved in. Others looked almost untouched from the outside, which made them even creepier. We walked into one that still had intact windows and furniture inside. Ben was freaking out the whole time. He kept saying he felt like someone was watching us. He was always like that, scared of everything, so we mostly ignored him. But then we all heard it. A long, slow creak from somewhere deeper inside the house. Not the sound of the house settling, the sound of weight shifting on old wood, like someone stepping carefully across a floor. We all froze. I asked if everyone had heard it. They all nodded. Ethan, being Ethan, shouted into the dark, "Is someone there?" The sound stopped immediately. We stood there in silence for a long moment, listening. Nothing. Kyle and Ethan wanted to keep exploring, but I'd had enough. I told them we were leaving. I had this tight, sick feeling in my chest that wouldn't go away. Something about the place just felt wrong now. Since I was driving, they didn't argue. We started heading toward the front door. That's when Ben suddenly jumped back and pointed toward the window on the side of the house. 3 shadows were moving just outside, visible through the dirty glass. Clear silhouettes of heads and shoulders, moving slowly past the neighboring house toward the back. We all went silent. I crept over to the window and looked out. I saw the shadows slip around the corner of our house toward the backyard, just out of view. I whispered as quietly as I could, "We need to run now." Everyone nodded. We bolted. Straight out the front door, sprinting across the overgrown yard toward my car. The church loomed ahead in the dark. My car was parked right in front of it, maybe 50 feet away. That's when Ben screamed. I looked up and my entire body went cold. There was a woman standing next to my car, tall, impossibly thin, wearing a long black dress that looked rotted and filthy. Her hair hung down in front of her face in thick, tangled strands. She had the back door open. One of her legs was already inside the car. She was climbing in. When Ben screamed, she stopped, turned her head toward us, then let go of the door and ran, not away from us, into the church. We didn't stop running. I got to the car first, looked into the back seat, empty, thank God, and we all piled in. I started the engine and floored it. I went so fast down that dirt road that I lost control for a second and nearly hit a tree. I didn't care. I just wanted out. We didn't talk much on the drive home. When we finally did, we all agreed she was probably homeless. Someone living in the village because no one else was there. That made sense, except for one thing. Why was she trying to get into my car? Years later, I told my girlfriend the story. She looked it up, and that's when I found out the entire village had been demolished in 2014. It's completely gone now, just empty land. There's so much more information about it online now than there ever was when I was a kid. Back then, we could barely find anything. That added to the mystery. But even with all the research I've done since, I've never been able to explain what happened that night. I still think about her sometimes. That woman, standing next to my car in the dark, one leg already inside, and I wonder what she would have done if we'd been 10 seconds slower, or if Ben hadn't screamed, or if we hadn't noticed her at all until we were already driving. I also think about something I found a few years ago while searching online. Someone had posted an old forum thread from 2005 asking if anyone had been to the abandoned military village. Most of the replies were jokes or dares, but one reply, posted late at night with no username, just said, "Don't go in the houses. And if you park near the church, check your back seat before you drive away." She likes to hide there. The post was deleted a few days later. I wish I'd seen it before we went. I watched him being carried out in a body bag from my bedroom window, and a year later I saw him standing in that same window staring back at me. When I was in middle school, my family moved to a new house. It was a huge upgrade. Bigger rooms, better neighborhood, tons of kids my age. Everything about it was perfect, except for the neighbor directly next door. He was the textbook mean old man. If we played football in the street and the ball rolled even remotely close to his yard, he'd start pounding on his window from inside the house, screaming at us to stay off his property. We never actually stepped on his lawn, not once. Didn't matter, he'd watch for us. The second we came outside, the banging would start, the yelling, the threats. As a kid, it was terrifying. As I got older, it just became annoying. This went on for about 6 months after we moved in. Then one day, the banging stopped. We didn't see him anymore, didn't hear him. My friends joked that he must have finally died. I laughed along with them. A month later, I woke up early one morning while it was still dark. There were flashing red and blue lights coming through my window. I looked outside and saw an ambulance parked in his driveway. 2 paramedics were carrying something out the front door. A black body bag, zipped up, on a stretcher. My friend Marcus was sleeping over that night. He woke up and came to the window just as they loaded the bag into the back of the ambulance. We didn't say anything, we just watched. I felt sick. Not because I was sad, I didn't even know the guy, but because I'd been joking about him dying, and now he actually had. I kept thinking, he must have been dead in there for weeks before anyone noticed. That thought stayed with me. After he died, the house just sat there, empty, or at least unoccupied. All his stuff was still inside, his furniture, his clothes, his dishes, everything exactly the way he left it. Apparently he had a son, but the son lived out of state and didn't bother coming back. Not even to clear out the house. So it just sat there year after year, slowly rotting from the inside. My bedroom window looked directly into his. I could see into his living room, his hallway, part of his kitchen. At night, when the streetlight hit it at the right angle, you could see the shapes of furniture inside, covered in dust. I started telling my friends the place was haunted. It became a running joke, especially with my friend Marcus, who was scared of everything. Every time he came over, I'd tell him I saw the old man's ghost standing in the window. He'd cover his ears and tell me to shut up. Everyone would laugh. One night, Marcus had enough. He dared me to go inside. I hesitated. Breaking into someone's house, even an abandoned one, felt like crossing a line. But Marcus called me a coward in front of everyone, and I caved. I walked over to the house and tried the front door. Locked. I tried kicking it in, but I weighed maybe 130 pounds soaking wet. The door didn't budge. There was a small window next to the front door. I tried prying it open, and to my surprise, it slid up easily. I looked back at my friends who were watching from my bedroom window, then I climbed inside. The smell hit me immediately. Rot. Mildew. Something sour and heavy underneath it all. I had to pull my shirt up over my nose just to breathe. The living room was frozen in time. A recliner sat facing an old TV. Next to it was a side table with a book lying face down, a bookmark still tucked inside. On the coffee table was a pair of reading glasses. I moved into the kitchen. The smell was worse there. Overpowering. There was a small table with 2 chairs. One of them had a sweater draped over the back. In front of it was a coffee mug, the inside stained brown. The stove had pots and pans sitting on the burners, covered in a thick layer of dust. I lifted one of the lids, empty. I left the kitchen and walked down a narrow hallway. The first room on the left was the one I could see from my bedroom. I stepped inside and walked to the window. My friends were all crammed into my window across the way, waving at me. Marcus looked stunned that I was actually still in there. I waved back. That's when I heard it. A loud bang from the other side of the house. Not subtle, not a creak or a settling sound. A heavy thud, like someone had slammed into a wall. I froze. I stared down the hallway, listening. Nothing. I looked back at my friends. They looked confused, like they couldn't figure out why I was just standing there. I didn't wait to hear it again. I turned, walked quickly to the front door, unlocked it from the inside, and left. When I got back to my room, I told everyone what I'd seen. The smell, the frozen coffee mug, the bang. We talked about it for a while, but eventually moved on. That night, after everyone fell asleep, Marcus woke me up. "Dude," he whispered, "I can't sleep," I groaned. "Why?" "I keep hearing noises." "From next door." I told him he was imagining things because of what I'd said earlier. Told him to go back to sleep. He didn't say anything. And then in that silence, I heard it. 2 loud knocks. I sat up. Marcus looked at me, wide-eyed. That's what I keep hearing. I got up and went to the window. Marcus followed. We both looked across at the old man's house. It was dark inside. I could barely make out anything. Then Marcus grabbed my arm. "What is that?" he whispered. I followed his gaze to the doorway of the room I'd been in earlier. There was a silhouette, just standing there. I told myself it was a coat rack, a shadow, something we were misinterpreting in the dark. Then Marcus screamed. It just moved. The others woke up and crowded around the window. They all saw it too. We argued in loud. I kept saying there was no way it could be a person. It had to be a trick of the light, a shadow from the street lamp, something. Then one of my friends pointed and said, very quietly, "It's at the window now." I looked. The figure had moved from the doorway to the window. It was standing directly in front of the glass, facing us. We could see the outline clearly now. A person, tall, still. We all went silent. Then it moved again, slowly. It walked backward, away from the window, and disappeared into the darkness of the hallway. We stared at that window for the rest of the night. We never saw it again. The next morning, I tried to rationalize it. I told my friends it must have been the old man's son finally coming back to check on the house. It was the only explanation that made sense. They didn't believe me. I didn't really believe me either. About a year later, the son actually did show up. He brought a dumpster, gutted the entire house, and sold it within a month. My dad talked to him while he was clearing things out. The son told him he and his father hadn't spoken in over a decade. He said it took him years to even work up the nerve to come back and deal with the property. He'd never set foot in that house after his father died. Not once. I'm in my 30s now. I still see those friends once a year, even though we all live in different states. Every time we get together, someone brings up that night. We still don't have an explanation. I've thought about it a lot over the years. Maybe it was a squatter. Maybe it was a trick of the light. Maybe our minds filled in the blanks because we were scared and suggestible. But I keep coming back to one detail I didn't mention before. When I was inside that house, standing in the old man's room, I looked at his bed. It was made, neatly, like he'd just gotten up that morning. But on the pillow, pressed into the fabric, was the clear outline of a head, like someone had been lying there, recently. I didn't tell my friends that part, and I still don't know what to make of it. But a few months ago, my parents sold that house and moved. I went back one last time to help them pack. I stood in my old bedroom and looked out the window at the house next door. New family, lights on, kids playing in the yard. It looked normal, alive. But just before I turned to leave, I glanced up at the window one more time, and for just a second, maybe less, I swear I saw someone standing there, watching. When my wife and I first started dating, we did stupid things. Not dangerous in the way that hurt anyone else, but reckless in the way young people are when they think they're invincible. We explored abandoned buildings, broke into condemned houses, trespassed on old industrial sites. She was obsessed with finding proof of ghosts. I didn't believe in any of it, but I liked her, so I went along. Out of all the places we explored, only one left me without an explanation. I still don't have one. It happened on a night so dark it felt heavier than usual. The kind of night where cloud cover blocks out the moon and stars completely, and everything beyond your flashlight beam just disappears into black. She'd found a house online. No address listed, just rough coordinates and a couple of forum posts warning people to stay away. That, of course, made her want to go even more. The house was miles from anything. No neighbors. No street lights. Just a narrow dirt road through the trees that ended at a structure that looked like it had been slowly dying for decades. The roof sagged in the middle. The windows were either boarded up or shattered. The porch had collapsed on one side. I told her before we even got out of the car that this place wasn't safe. Not because of ghosts. Because it looked like it could fall apart if someone sneezed inside it. She didn't care. The front door was boarded over with warped plywood. I had to kick it in. It took 3 tries. When it finally gave, the wood splintered inward and we stepped into what used to be a living room. Except half the floor was missing. Right in the center of the room was a gaping hole from where the floorboards had rotted through and collapsed into the basement below. We shined our flashlights down into it. I could see broken beams, piles of debris, standing water at the bottom. I told her we should leave. She said, "Just wait a minute." That was always her line. Just wait. Just one more room. Just 5 more minutes. She started moving around the edges of the room, testing the floor with each step, shining her light into the corners. I stayed near the door. I didn't trust the structure at all. She called me a coward. I didn't argue. A few minutes later, my curiosity got the better of me. I made my way carefully into the next room where she was crouched near a pile of old furniture and water-damaged boxes. She was sifting through it, looking for anything personal left behind by whoever used to live there. Letters, photos, anything that told a story. That was her thing. I wanted no part of it. She told me to check upstairs. I hesitated. She said the sooner we searched the whole house, the sooner we could leave. I went. The staircase groaned with every step. I was sure it was going to collapse under me. At the top, there was a room immediately to the right. I went in. It was a bedroom. The bed was still made. At the foot of it was a neatly folded bathrobe, like someone had just set it down, intending to come back. There were clothes in the dresser, knickknacks on the shelves, everything covered in years of dust. It felt wrong, like stepping into a time capsule no one was supposed to open. In the corner of the room, I noticed a small door, a crawl space. I'd found interesting things in crawl spaces before, so I crouched down and went in. The smell hit me immediately. Rot, mildew, something sweet and sour underneath it all. The crawl space was filled with baby supplies, unopened boxes of diapers stacked against the wall. Jars of baby food, most of them chewed through by rodents. The contents dried into hard clumps. A folded blanket with cartoon animals on it. A mobile with plastic stars hanging from thin string. All of it ancient. All of it covered in thick dust and cobwebs. I was about to back out when I heard something. A slow creak. I froze and listened. It was faint but rhythmic. Back and forth. Back and forth. I turned my flashlight toward the far corner of the crawl space and saw another opening. A narrow passage that looked like it ran the length of the house toward the other bedroom. The creaking was coming from that direction. I tried to crawl toward it, but I was too big to fit. So I backed out and headed into the hallway. The second bedroom was at the far end, past the stairs on the left. As I got closer, the creaking got louder, steady, deliberate. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but from adrenaline. I was ready to be jumped by raccoons or possums or whatever the hell was living in there. I reached the doorway and stepped inside. A woman was sitting in a rocking chair facing the window. I froze. She was rocking slowly back and forth, back and forth. I could only see the back of her head, long thin hair, a dark, old-fashioned dress that went down to her ankles. She didn't react to me at all. I stood there for a long moment, trying to see her reflection in the window, but it was too dark outside. I couldn't make out any features. I took one full step forward. The floor creaked. She stopped rocking immediately. I started to apologize. I told her we didn't know anyone still lived here. I said we'd leave right away. She didn't respond. Then slowly, she started rocking again. I took another step and asked if she was okay. She stopped again. This time she stood up, slowly, stiffly, like her joints hadn't moved in years. And then I heard her make a sound, not words. Just a low, tuneless hum, and then she turned around, fast, too fast. I saw her face for less than a second, wrinkled, sunken, eyes that didn't catch the light right. I turned and ran. I bolted down the hallway, down the stairs, screaming for my girlfriend that we had to leave right now. She was still in the other room, laughing. She thought I was messing with her. I begged her to listen. I told her someone was upstairs, an old woman, still living in the house. She didn't believe me. She wanted to see for herself. I followed her back upstairs, shouting the whole way for her to stop. She ignored me and walked straight to the bedroom at the end of the hall. When she got to the doorway, she stopped. "Oh my God," she said. I ran up behind her, ready for anything. She started laughing. Inside the room was the rocking chair, empty. She asked if I'd been scared of a rocking chair and kept laughing. I told her there was a woman sitting there. I swore it. She just shook her head and looked around the room. No, nothing. She walked past me back toward the stairs. "Okay," she said. "We can go." We were halfway down the hall when we both heard it. The creak of the rocking chair, slow, steady, back and forth. She stopped, looked at me, mouthed the words, "What is that?" Then we heard the humming, low, tuneless, the same sound I'd heard before. She took a few steps back toward the bedroom and looked inside. I saw her entire body go rigid. She turned and ran. We both did. We didn't stop until we were in the car. She was screaming, asking what the hell we just saw. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I wanted to look back at the house as we drove away. I wanted to see if there was a figure standing in the window, but I was too scared to look. I don't know what we saw that night. Maybe it was paranormal. Maybe it was just a very old woman living alone in a rotting house with a boarded up door and a hole in the floor. But I don't believe that. Not long ago, I brought it up with my wife. We drove back to the location. The house was gone, not demolished with rubble left behind, just gone. Empty land, overgrown grass, no foundation, no driveway, nothing. Like it had never been there at all. I still think about that woman sometimes, the way she turned around so fast, the way her face looked wrong in the flashlight. And I think about the baby supplies in the crawl space, because a few months ago I found an old newspaper archive online and searched for deaths in that area. I found an obituary from 1979. A woman who lived alone on a rural property outside of town. No surviving family. Cause of death, natural causes. But buried in the article was one line. She is predeceased by her infant daughter, who died in one Cynthia in 1962. The house matched the rough location, and I keep wondering if that's who we saw. Or if it was someone, something else. Either way, I'm glad the house is gone, because sometimes late at night when the room is dark and quiet, I still hear it. The slow creak of a rocking chair, and the low, tuneless hum of a voice that doesn't belong to anyone living.